welcome to the third and final episode of EQA GCSE History, the First World War. In the last episode, we discussed the early war, stalemate, the failure at Gallipoli, and key battles such as the Battle of Verdun and the Battle of the Somme. In this episode, we will explore the war at sea, the United States' entry into the conflict, the upheaval of the Russian Revolution, and finally, Germany's defeat, marking the end of the war. I will also be including some past paper questions for you to practice at the end. Since the outbreak of war in 1914, the Royal Navy had dominated the seas and oceans, leading to what is known as a naval blockade. This blockade intercepted supplies from arriving at German ports and attempted to starve the German population into surrender. Although the German fleet was still in no position to challenge the British Grand Fleet, the British were concerned about the lethal power of German submarines or U-boats and new technologies such as mines and torpedoes. This concern was justified when, in September 1914, a German submarine sank 3 British cruisers in the English Channel, resulting in 1,500 deaths. Also in May 1915, a German U-boat sank a luxury liner off the coast of Ireland, killing 1,000 passengers, 128 of them American citizens, leading to widespread anger not only in Britain, but now also in America. Following this attack, both fleets remained inactive, as Britain responded to German U-boat attacks by organizing supply ships into effective convoys protected by the Royal Navy. By 1916, Germany, impatient and starving after 2 years of stagnation on the Western Front and the British blockade, decided to make a move. In May 1916, the German and British fleets clashed off the Danish coast in what the British dubbed as the Battle of Jutland. The results were inconclusive. You could say that the Germans won this battle as they lost fewer men and sunk more ships, but after the Battle of Jutland, the German high seas fleet stayed in harbor until the end of the war. By early 1917, Germany decided to resume unrestricted submarine warfare as a last resort. Some in the German government believed that this type of warfare would bring the United States into the war, guaranteeing Germany's defeat. Yet, the other option was peace, which seemed increasingly unlikely given that the Allies were demanding terms Germany could not accept. After the return of unrestricted submarine warfare, Wilson immediately broke off relations with Germany. He did not yet declare war, but armed neutrality, which meant that the United States would arm and protect its shipping. However, the German government assumed that war was now inevitable, and therefore on January 16, 1917, German Foreign Minister Arthur Zimmermann sent a telegram to Mexico suggesting an alliance against the United States with promises of financial aid and support for Mexico to reclaim their lost territories of Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. The British captured and decoded this message, and on April 5, 1917, the United States declared war on Germany. The addition of the United States of America to the Allies was a significant boost. By 1917, America was a mighty industrial power with the third largest navy in the world and abundant manpower. However, the United States still had to mobilize its army and ship them all the way to Europe. And of course, not everything went flawlessly for the Allies. On November 1917, the Bolshevik Revolution began in Russia. A coup d'etat led by communist revolutionary Vladimir Lenin saw the establishment of the first communist state and the beginning of the Russian Civil War. The communist takeover in Russia proved favorable for Germany, leading to ceasefire negotiations and subsequent peace. By early 1918, Germany withdrew troops from the east, redeploying them to the Western Front, marking a significant setback for the Allies. Back on the Western Front, Germany opted for a defensive strategy, withdrawing to a fortified Hindenburg Line. These defenses relied on strategically positioned machine guns and extensive artillery barrages. To counter German defenses, the British relied on heavy artillery superiority and tactics known as bite and hold, which involved targeting specific areas with artillery, capturing and fortifying the position, and slowly biting into German territory. The war also saw the introduction of airplanes and strategic bombardment. Early in the war, airplanes focused on surveillance and establishing air superiority, but as technology improved throughout the war, so did strategies. For example, strategic bombardment, developed by an Italian general, consisted of bombing raids aimed at industrial or military targets or even civilian populations that intended to destroy the enemy's morale. This strategy began with giant Zeppelin airship that would drop bombs on London and ended with the creation of specialized bomber aircraft. By 1918, the blockade and the war of attrition began to take a toll on Germany. Food and supply shortages were at an all-time high, sparking doubts about the Kaiser's decision as defeat or revolution loomed on the horizon. The Spring or Ludendorff Offensive of March 1918 saw a massive transfer of German troops to the Western Front, which now significantly outnumbered the Allied forces, employing innovative tactics such as using the elite stormtroopers, which were a highly trained infantry soldiers specialized in rapid, decisive assaults on enemy positions. Initially, the Germans broke through British lines and threatened to divide the British and French armies. However, German advances slowed down due to logistical challenges, and the American forces, which were arriving at a rate of 50,000 men a month, bolstered the Allied defense. The decisive Allied counteroffensive, nicknamed the 100 Days Offensive, began in August 1918. With coordinated attacks supported by tanks, air support, and artillery, the Allies broke the 4-year stalemate of trench warfare and paved the way for mobile fighting tactics. By October, Germany was in full retreat, and by November 1918, the German High Command started to look for peace with the Allies. While the victory came at a high cost, with casualties exceeding over 1 million for both sides, it ultimately marked a turning point in the war. The mounting military losses, widespread hunger among civilians, and the deadly Spanish flu pandemic, which claimed over 250,000 German lives, instilled a growing sense of defeat amongst the population. By October 1918, the German High Seas Fleet, which, if you remember, had been inactive since the Battle of Jutland in 1916, was ordered on a suicidal mission against the British Navy. Sensing the impending end of the war, sailors rebelled and refused to set sail. This sparked widespread protests in Germany, with calls for an end to the already lost war. On November 9, 1918, the Kaiser abdicated, finally surrendering and escaping to the Netherlands. 2 days later, on November 11, 1918, a German delegation met with the Allies in a railway carriage on the Western Front. The Allies presented Germany with strict terms for unconditional surrender, including leaving occupied territories, surrendering its navy, and disarming. Germany had little choice but to accept, and the armistice was signed. The First World War was a devastating war for humanity, leaving millions dead and wounded and a generation scarred. The harsh terms imposed on Germany by the Treaty of Versailles in 1919 severely punished the Central Powers, and many historians agree that it undoubtedly contributed to the outbreak of the Second World War 20 years later. For the final segment of this video, I'm going to show you some past paper questions followed by the official AQA mark scheme. Please feel free to use them however you want. I'm sorry it took so long to get this video out. I've been having my own exams. That's over now. So I'll try and get the Elizabeth video out as soon as possible. Thank you for watching.